was pretty planned. So both players having the good game sense, and now it's starting to even out. Even though Fantasy did have that dropship advantage early on, and now it's not really going to matter that much because they're going to be switching. Everybody's going to be switching to heavy battlecruisers here, and it'll just be come down to battlecruiser micro. I think that economically they're both pretty much even. They both have 6 bases, 6 mining bases. I'm sure the natural or the main is probably mined out by now, if not close to it. But we'll see how this pans out, and that's a lot of starports. Looks like 3, 6, 7 starports for Fantasy, and I think it was about 6 for Light. I didn't see exactly. A lot of dropships moving out for Fantasy. Both players are going to probably have to free up some psi eventually too, so we'll see how aggressive they get. If they just get aggressive with their units, try to tag out a couple expansions. You know, it looks like some drops here from Fantasy. Fantasy coming in and dropping all his tanks on Light. Fantasy does appear to have the superior ground force, at least right now, at least in that position. And Fantasy is going to get the siege position up on Light's base. So Light now lifting off all his factories. He doesn't even care about his factories anymore. That's a little premature, I think. Physics Lab going up for Light, and I think it's a little premature to lift up those factories because he doesn't have any battlecruisers out just yet, and Fantasy might be catching him off guard here. Yes, Fantasy is going for battlecruisers, but it might not even matter if Fantasy can take him out now with this force he has now. Fantasy is sieging this natural base here of Light. He's all up in his base. Light's going to respond here by taking a drop of his own to the top left of Fantasy's base and probably take out that base. So both players, like I said, being really aggressive, possibly trying to just free up psi, not really caring because they know they're going to get battlecruisers out. It looks like Light was building another science facility. Is that what I saw? I don't know why he's building another science facility. Maybe in anticipation he's going to lose that one. Already 4 battlecruisers out for Light. They haven't showed how many battlecruisers Fantasy has, if he has any. I'm sure he has some by now because he got his starports up actually slightly before Light. Looks like, wow, Light is just giving up his total main base right now. And in the top left, Fantasy in the meantime is going to defend up there, even though his expansion is already dead. He's just trying to defend his other expansions up there. So little line of tanks wall there, just saying, hey, don't come over to my side, and I'm not going to come over to yours, and we're cool. Light is, again, losing his main. Also, critically, he's going to lose those armories that are probably upgrading, so that can be a huge deal if Fantasy has better upgrades for his air weapons. And I can't see, it doesn't look like, no, none of those armories are upgrading anything anymore. He might have canceled those upgrades in anticipation of losing those armories. But again, Fantasy was aggressive with his tanks and his ground force, and so was Light, but I think it paid off more for Fantasy. Fantasy did lose one expansion. Battlecruisers now coming in here. Going to take out these Goliaths and probably this force. Light's going to have to pick up, he only picks up a couple tanks and runs with those, so he's going to just give up those tanks. I really think Fantasy is definitely taking the edge here. And wow, now Fantasy even trying to drop his, wow, excellent move by Fantasy. Wow, that was amazing. Fantasy anticipating those dropships, trying to flee, brought his own dropships in and dropped his Goliath as soon as possible, being able to take out that force of Light. And Light now, I think, is largely behind in the ground force count. Even though he is switching to battlecruisers, you still want to have those tanks, especially, or Goliaths, to be able to put that extra pressure on, at least to the sort of kind of mid-late game, until everybody just has all battlecruisers. It does still matter that, you know, you do need that ground force still. You can't just rely fully on the battlecruisers, especially not this stage. And now that Light has lost his 2 expansions, it looks like Fantasy has... wow, the mini-map is really blurry. I think Fantasy also only has 4 mining bases now too, so I think it's even, but it's really hard to tell just because it's hard to see in the map. We'll have to wait till they click over there. Both players, I can hear the scans going off. You probably can't because you can't hear the game. Well, both players just kind of scanning, trying to see where their other forces are at. Both players building up a lot of battlecruisers, but I still think that Fantasy can actually get a lot done with this ground force. There's a huge ground force for Fantasy. Fantasy also trying to put up another expansion back where it used to be before. But again, I think that Light was a little careless in not defending his main base because he lost all his armories, he lost all his factories, and now all he's going to have left is those battlecruisers. But if he fails those battlecruisers, that's going to be like an instant GG. However, he does have a lot of battlecruisers. I haven't shown them all together. Yeah, he has a lot there. He's got about 5 or 6 there, and it looks like 6 more here. So he's pretty much reached that control group of 12 battlecruisers. And in the meantime, it doesn't look like Fantasy has as many battlecruisers, but now he's all up in this other base that Light, again, I think Light is a little careless and just totally giving up all of his bases here. Fantasy is just doing a good job of taking out all of Light's other bases, even though they're probably almost mined out. It looks like Fantasy coming in here doing some preemptive Yamato gun on all those tanks. I don't know if that's a good idea, because now he's not going to have any Yamato against the Yamato of Light, but now he's bringing all his tanks in here, and here's going to be a big battlecruiser battle. Looks like Yamato's going off. Well, only a couple Yamatos for Light. It looks like Light maybe doesn't have the energy for all those Yamatos. Fantasy did have the battlecruisers up a little bit earlier, and now, this is what I'm talking about. Fantasy still has his ground force, and it's still critical, because they have about an even battlecruiser force, maybe a few less for Fantasy, but because Fantasy still has tons of tanks, because he wasn't so wasteful with all of his... he's now able to siege right there, and now he's able to even drop all of his units up here, so his ground force is supporting his battlecruiser force, and that's the key here. It looks like Light is doing a good job of using that Yamato and fending off the forces of Best, or I'm sorry, not Best, that was the last game, of Fantasy. But still, I mean, I think that Light is slowly getting pushed farther and farther back. He's slowly losing more and more of his bases, losing supply depots. Fantasy is definitely in control of this game, just because he has the superior ground force. And now a Science Vessel coming out. It'll be interesting to see that Science Vessel gets the EMP off. He's trying to get the EMP off. There's the EMP off. He does get the EMP off. Barely in time. That's going to be a critical move, because now Light does not have any Yamato. However, Fantasy wasted a couple of his Yamato on Light's tanks, too. But I wouldn't say it was a waste, because he used them all. Wow! A couple of Yamatos going off here. Fantasy does look like he has superior numbers. It's hard to tell, but it looks like Fantasy's going to come out on top. Neither player having the Yamato anymore, but no, Light does have a superior battlecruiser force. So he is going to be able to take out the battlecruisers of Fantasy, and only one Goliath there. So, wow, now Fantasy does look like he is a little bit in trouble, because he does have that large ground force like I was talking about, but he is inferior in his number of battlecruisers. This could be a big moment. I think Light needs to take advantage of this and move out now with those battlecruisers, take out as many tanks as he can, and just push on Fantasy. We'll see what he decides to do, but also I think the longer the game goes out, the more and more behind Light will be, because Light is now totally pushed to the left side of the map and only has those 3 bases. They are the new bases with all the new money, though, new mineral patches, so he could actually be effectively mining more than Fantasy is, but Fantasy does have the top 2 bases in the top left, I think. So it's still 5 bases versus 3, although Fantasy's original 2 bases are surely mined out. So it's probably 3 mining bases versus 3 mining bases, so it is pretty even. So maybe it is economically even here. It's kind of hard to tell. Looks like Light isn't going to push out. He is upgrading, and so is Fantasy on his armories, as the observers are pointing out. I'll have to check the upgrades on those battlecruisers next time they click on them. It probably just air upgrades going down. Fantasy still has that large tank force moving out. It can still do a lot of damage, but the problem is he doesn't have the battlecruiser force to back it up. So as soon as he moves out with those tanks, battlecruisers from Light are going to come and just kill all those tanks. And it looks like Light is building another command center in anticipation of trying to take another base. Both players probably close. I mean, well, Fantasy certainly maxed. Light's probably maxed too with all those battlecruisers. So it's going to be interesting to see if anybody tries to make a switch. Wow, Light has a ton of battlecruisers. That's probably 2 control groups of battlecruisers. It's definitely a huge force. And he's probably going to go try to pick off all these tanks. We'll see what happens. He's just kind of moving around right now. But it is important to note that he does have a lot larger amount of battlecruisers. Wow, all these shuttles or dropships coming in here, but they're going to get picked off because they're getting scouted by these battlecruisers. Luckily, Fantasy was smart there, pulled back his dropships, but wow, that was close. That could have been a risky move for Fantasy, losing all those dropships. Although, at this point, I mean, he could almost want to free up that Psy and get rid of those tanks. He's got a lot of Psy still invested in those tanks, so he's not able to build as many battlecruisers as Light has. Now Light does have 2 science vessels with his 2 control groups of battlecruisers, and it's definitely a different composition of armies. While I thought earlier that Light was making a mistake by just giving up all his bases and going straight to battlecruisers, now that we're in the later game, it has paid off for Light, because Light doesn't need to have all that Psy invested in those tanks, and it looks like he's actually picking off his SCVs to free up some more Psy just to get some extra battlecruisers. He does have a ton of starports too. It looks like he might have even a few more starports than Fantasy has. So now he's probably going to go take out those tanks, although he probably doesn't really care that those tanks are there because they're not doing anything, and it's just clogging up the Psy of the Psy count of Fantasy. Fantasy's got. I think for Fantasy to be effective here, he's got to go do what he's doing right now. Use those dropships and effectively take out an expansion. But because all of his Light's expansions are so close together, it's pretty easy for him to defend with battlecruisers. So, other than Fantasy just killing off his tanks, I mean, there's not much he can do. He has to free up Psy, otherwise he's going to lose in the battlecruiser battle. But at the same time, he doesn't want to just waste tanks. Looks like he's going in here. He's going to lose 2 dropships. Look, now he's just freeing up Psy. Definitely, I hope he's just freeing up Psy. If not, that was a pretty stupid move. I think he's just freeing up Psy. Yeah, he's not dropping anything, so those dropships are empty. So he's just getting rid of the dropships right now and trying to get a scout in on the base of Light. Not that there's anything to scout, but building battle cruisers. Light looks like he's built a couple, or excuse me, those were Fantasy's glass. So actually, Fantasy now looks like he freed up some Psy and built a couple